Hey, what's up? I'm Guy.
I'm John.
It's our YouTube channel. Subscribe to it and give this video a like.
Podcast below in the description. Check it out right now.
And check out our friends at decked.com/ham.
If you have a truck, go right now, decked.com/ham.
Let me read you this Kyle Shanahan quote from the podcast. Talking about Mac Jones. The context of it, if you didn't hear it, was they were talking about all the other rumors that were out there. And Schrager said, hey, I thought it was Mac Jones, tennis family. And Kyle said, the reason we moved up was because I think either one of them was a good decision. Either one of those players would have been a great pick, in my opinion. And the third guy with Justin, he would have been a great pick too. End quote. And if you want to hear that was around the 50 minute mark of that podcast, if you want to hear the full context of it. But, you know, that to me speaks to what I've always maintained, which is I think Mac Jones was ahead of Justin Fields. I've thought that. I've said that since the draft. You and I both, in the moment of truth, right before the draft, said they're taking Trey Lance. That was our prediction. But I've believed that Mac Jones was real. Now, was he ever ahead of Trey Lance? I don't know. I'm not saying that. But I do think he was actually, truly considered. And I do think at the end, Mac Jones was ahead of Fields on the Niners draft board. And I think Kyle kind of gave it away when he called Justin the third guy.
I don't even think it's debatable at this point, and I disagree with their evaluation. Now, I look at it from a big picture scouting traits. Coaches do not, because Sean, didn't it feel like Sean kind of doubled down on with Kyle? People were shitting, like it pissed Sean off. Like everyone's shitting on this kid. Like, I think he's good. I love it when a coach does this too. You know, we're not in the quarterback. We're in the quarterback market. And then he rattles off all his traits. Like, Sean, you're a football junkie. I know you watched 3 or 4 of his games because you were hearing the hype. If you're
him,
he was
watching receivers, and right, he was watching receivers too.
But think about this: if you're him and you start thinking like they might take Mac Jones, wouldn't you just, if you're already watching those guys, kind of focus on him? Like, you might be playing this guy for the next 4 or 5 years.
Right.
I don't even think it would be that crazy. And the way Sean talked, like, I think he's good. You know why? Coaches think he's good because you watch him. He's incredible at running the offense. My pushback is like he doesn't have the physical traits, guys. When he's getting chased by Aaron Donald and DeForest Buckner, he's going to get killed. He doesn't have a great arm, but all those guys see is like, you see his base, see his anticipation. It's about playing the quarterback. And they both were like on the same page on that. I would imagine if we went through a lot of coaches in the NFL, I'm not even talking Sean or Kyle, which clearly would have been high on him. And I think it's fair to say that everyone in that scheme probably liked Mac Jones. But I bet a lot of quarterback coaches and offensive coordinators were high on Mac Jones. Just like I think a lot of the scouting community, think about this guy. The Denver Broncos now are run by a GM. Now, they were with Elway too, but like a true personnel guy, the dude, General Patton. The Seattle Seahawks, or not Seattle Seahawks guy now runs the Panthers. And both those guys, when they needed quarterback, I guess they already had Sam Darnold, but they would have known that like Justin Fields, it was kind of clear that he might fall a little bit in the draft. I would say by about middle of free agency, it was like, God, people are down on Justin Fields. By the time the Orlovsky stuff came out, some people were just kind of down on him. You know, I don't quite understand it. He ended up going before Mac Jones, but they both kind of went, one guy went 12th, the other guy went 15th. Belichick didn't take him. Like, I think a lot of GMs were probably in the ear of their owner. Like, this is, you know, you don't take Kirk Cousins in the top 15. Even if you think he's going to be Kirk Cousins. Coaches don't care. Like, and that's where I'm glad whether Kyle decided on it, his personnel people talked him into it. However, they came to the conclusion of like, if you're going to invest your entire life savings, as you did with this trade, you have to swing for the fences here.
And at the end of the day, he might have liked him. He might have just liked him more, right? When he starts talking about, I need a top 5 quarterback.
Trey,
he might have said, because go back to the quote, you need a top 5 quarterback because that guy can bail you out of anything. Maybe that was the deciding factor. This guy has the traits to be a top 5 quarterback. I
agree, but I think it's fair to say, because we listen to him talk about Mac, and even I think Sean knows. All these guys, it's like incestual. They're all buddies. Like, how do all these guys not know exactly what the other guy thinks? How does Mike McDaniel, I recommend, or not Mike LaFleur, the Jets did an awesome little YouTube series with a lot of LaFleur, who's pretty impressive. But like LaFleur's, the two brothers are like best friends with the McVays, who are best friends with the Salas, who all work for the Shanahans, who are, it's like they all know what everyone's thinking. I do not believe that they didn't know, or at least have a very, very good feel. And I think Kyle would have been, after hearing him talk, like, I think he wanted Trey Lance. Obviously, they took him, but he thinks he could have won with Mac Jones.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and you can tell it pisses him off. When people talk about it, like, and you've always said this from the jump. And my pushback on this is pretty simple. If you're taking your life savings to invest in something, because your take was, we can't act like one player's floor, like no one's floor. We see it time and time again in the draft, right?
There's no sure thing.
No. It's like, okay, you don't invest in that sweet startup, invest in just some basic business. Well, what if something happens and that thing goes bankrupt? Things change all the time. Solomon Thomas, worst case, he's going to be a solid rotational guy by about year 2. You're like,
it's a great example. That's a great example.
But coaches don't think like that guy because they just see the plays and they see it work.
Yep.
But then
at minimum, I'll be able to trust this guy.
Then what happens is they get really mad by about year 2 when it's not working. Right.
Right.
And I think Kyle would have learned that. And I think the other thing that stood out to me about Kyle, not that you didn't know this, not you, but just in general,
big arm.
He should be. He's cocky. Like he believes in his ability
as a quarterback, as a Pop Warner quarterback.
Well, that too. But I'm just saying, like he should. And listen, I've been around Pat Hill, Andy Reid, those guys. Maybe a little humble. They're cocky inside. It's a good quality. I think with coaches, quarterbacks, star NBA players, star golfer, like you better fucking believe in yourself. But I think, did that come out to you when you heard him talk? Like, he believes in his ability to do this shit.
Yeah, I think part of when you say, just think about the way he was talking about the jobs, right? Whether you buy or not, he would have waited for a top 5 quarterback.
And that's 4 years ago, guy.
Right. He had 4 interviews.
Before he took a team to Super Bowl.
He thought about canceling the Niners interview, he claimed. I'm too tired. Canceling an NFL head coach job interview? Yeah, I'm Kyle Shanahan. Somebody else will offer me another job. Yeah, I mean, I thought the way he talked about the Super Bowl, yes, and I think you hear it in McVay. You hear how
and I'm not anti the cockiness. Like,
no.
You want your coach to have some swag.
I think the way he talks, in addition to the way when you watch him every day, I think it's part of the reason a lot of people, like me, I think like you, even though we talk about he needs to produce wins and losses, like, right? But I think it's part of where the confidence in him comes from, is you see the confidence that he has in himself. And I'm sure that comes from a variety of things, one of which being around his dad, being around the game, understanding who's good, understanding who's bad, having been in 2 Super Bowls, feeling close. Clearly he feels like he could have won. Of course he could have. We think that too. 2 Super Bowls. And so it's probably just
it feels like he thinks he was a little closer.
In
Atlanta, he had a huge lead, and it was a little on him the way he called the plays. He was playing an elite team in the Chiefs. It wasn't as crazy looking back. They had a 10-point lead.
You know when you're comfortable in a situation, whether or not it has led to wins or losses, whatever the case. Like, sometimes you can lie to yourself, but you know when you're pushing the right buttons, and the evidence sometimes matches it up. Sometimes the evidence doesn't match up with what you think, but And then the other thing is, like, think about who he's talking to. He's talking to Mike Shanahan. He's talking to John Lynch. He's talking to Sean McVay. He's talking to Robert Saleh. And they're all reinforcing that, yes, you're one of the best at doing this. So, I mean, he's just a very confident guy. Yeah. And I think part of it is, I go back, he's just been in that world for so long. He's been an insider in that world for a really long time.
Well, like,
so
when
that's
you watch
why he believes, Mac Jones, just the point on that, like, yes, I still go back to it. I think part of why he was kind of pissed off in that Monday press conference before the draft was, even if he wasn't going to draft Mac, like, you guys are talking about him like he's a clown, and he's not a clown. And when I don't draft him, that's not evidence that Mac Jones is a clown. It's just evidence that I like Trey Lance. But don't make it into like, all right, Kyle, pat you on the back. That's right. You thought he was trash just like I did. He's like, no, I'm going to separate myself just because I'm not drafting him. There's a line between me and the guys that think he's trash, because that's not me.
That clearly pisses him off. I mean, that's something that, now we'll see how the tune changes if he's not any good in New England. And he'd be like, well, I'm not coaching him.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Right.
But I do get when coaches, like anyone in an industry that has to answer to the quote unquote the press, thinks like, you guys are asking me questions that I don't think you need to know, or that I don't think I need to defend to you, right? If Jed wants to ask me this question, if the guy, if Guido walks in here and be like, hey, Bud Light's giving us $200 million, the CEO just has a question for you. Like, you don't know, Jed needs you to do this. But like to the press, I do understand where the confrontations happen, right? It just, I think there's sometimes that guy, and this one, it was different than just a one-on-one with like an old school journal, right? It was the overwhelming, and we led the charge as well, the conversation. Like, this is fucking nuts. It was universal.
Yeah, and I think we don't even have to generalize it, right? We can talk really specifically about Kirk, because I think a lot of it comes from that. It's like, Kyle, I mean, explain yourself on Kirk Cousins. And he's like, you mean the guy that just threw 35 touchdowns, 4,200 yards? Why do I have to explain myself?
The guy that beat Drew Brees in the Superdome 2 years ago when there were fans. It wasn't empty. There were fans in there. Remember that?
Why do I have to explain myself?
And then we had to play them in the second round because they were in the second round of the playoffs. Like, I do think, wouldn't you say this? And I've come around on Cousins. And maybe just some players take longer, right? Like Josh Allen, immediately pretty damn good. 3 years. Mahomes, right off the bat. Some guys just, if they're not as fit, might take them a little bit longer to mature in their game. Well, I think Kyle, if you just ask the random guy that follows football about Kirk Cousins, if we did a grading scale like 1 to 10, the highest grade someone would give, the highest would be like a 7. But it feels like most people would give him like 5s and 6s. I think Kyle would look at him like, you guys are idiots.
He's better than 90% of the people that have ever played the position for more than 2 years.
So I think
Maybe
that type
more.
of stuff pisses him off. And that was, think about that. That was his guy who has gone on to make $150 million and is clearly way better than anyone ever thought.
And like you said, better with me.
That player specifically has been, I would say, one of the more polarizing players of like the second half of the last decade, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, because he's just, every year his contract has been up, and every year the number's been huge. And it's just, so every year it's like, well, is he worth it or is he not? And it's not some 3 years from now hypothetical.
I guess, yeah, you become polarizing when you make a lot of money and you're not viewed as like an elite guy.
And it's just a franchise deal. It's like, wait, they're going to pay him how much this year? The franchise tag, right? I think.
And it got really contentious. It was like, well, you already paid me the franchise tag. I'm not. In fairness to him, like he was turning down extensions and he was proven right.
Then you like that kind of? That was he was proven right.
You like that?
He was proven right. But I think Kyle told us we kind of guessed it. Kyle told us what his quarterback order was in that interview. So
I think, is it fair to say the order was really just 2 guys? And I was wrong on this. The information. I wonder if they never would have made that trade for Justin Fields. And it turns out
I don't think they would have. I said that
they wouldn't have had to, guy.
After the draft, I said I don't think they considered him, from what I'd heard. And you're right, they wouldn't have had to. So that would have been bad. They wouldn't have had to for Mac either. Both would have been bad. We wouldn't have necessarily known it, right? It would have been easy if they had drafted Fields to be like, yeah, he wouldn't have been there at 12. That's what we all would have said if they had drafted him. Like, he wouldn't have been there at 12 probably anyway. But
Lance, I think it's fair to say, without having the information, because we'll never know, under no circumstances would have been there at 12.
Agreed.
The other 2 guys literally were.
Totally agree.
One guy went at 12, the other guy went 15.
No arguing. There's no debate on that, which is kind of makes it fun, I guess, in some ways.